Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters, and Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Karr-Petras, and with me today is Lori Baker, who is Quilters Newsletter's creative editor. Hello, Lori.
Hi, Mary Kate.
And today we're going to be talking about bias binding, which is something that some patterns call for. And we're just going to go through some of the basics, and we're going to share with you the formula that we use here at Quilters Newsletter when we're writing patterns. So, Lori, let's get going. Lori brought some wonderful samples today.
Okay, there are three reasons that we might want to use bias binding. Mm-hmm. One is that some people say it's stronger, it wears better. The second is that it goes around curves much easier than straight grain binding.
So if you've got a scalloped border or something like that, you definitely want to use bias binding in that instance.
And if you're using striped fabric, it's much easier to use because you don't have to keep the stripe going straight if you cut it on the bias and it's a diagonal stripe.
And you get this really nice look. It's a great look.
It's beautiful.
It has more movement to it. So.
It does. It's just a really classy look, I think. Mm-hmm. So the first thing you need to do is figure out how much fabric you need.
Right.
And at Quilters Newsletter, we use the formula, the perimeter of the quilt plus 10 inches for insurance.
Just for insurance. Yep. Just to make it easy on yourself from the outset.
And then you multiply that times the width of the binding.
Yes.
And we typically use 2 1/4 inches.
Right.
You take the square root of that number, add an inch for, round it up, then add an inch for insurance.
For more insurance.
Yes, just to be sure.
We just want to make sure when we're having you cut this binding that you really are not going to run short and you're going to have just enough to get you through.
Exactly.
Not more than just enough.
More than enough. So for this piece.
And then you take that number, that final number, and that's the square.
Yes.
So if, for instance, if it's you come up with 9 inches after all of that, it's a 9-inch square, so 9 by 9.
Right. So for this piece, I did the math and came up with a 14-inch square.
Okay.
So I cut my 14-inch square, and then I'm going to cut that in half diagonally.
Yes.
But first I want to tell you a little thing that you want to think about, the direction your stripes go, because if you cut it one way, you'll have your stripes, so you're seaming with the stripe. If you cut it the other way, you're going to have to match your stripes from piece to piece.
And if your personality type is like some people, that will bother you if the stripes don't measure up all the way across. So this is better for
people like me that think it has to match.
So which would mean you want your stripes to line up vertically as you're looking at it.
As I cut it, I want them going vertically. So we're just going to line up our ruler from point to point and cut diagonally across our piece of fabric. We're going to move one piece of fabric to the other side.
Just lift it and move it over. You don't rotate it or anything.
Nope. Just straight over here. And then we're going to seam it with a 1/4 inch seam. You will notice that when I line it up, it's offset just a tiny smidgen. I eyeball that. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam, so I eyeball that I've got a 1/4 inch dog here.
If you were to make these match corner to corner, when you open it up, it's going to be offset that way. So you want to offset it now so that when you open it up, your raw edges line up the way you want them to.
Right. So then when we get that stitched, we still have that dog ear up there, but see, we've got a nice straight edge that goes. Okay, and then once it's seamed and pressed, the seams are pressed open to reduce
bulk. And so at this point, you can see here's where your bias is.
Correct.
So.
Correct.
want to be gentle with
And
that.
I was going to say, and
Yeah.
you don't want to do what Mary Kate just
No,
did.
no, no,
because
no,
it
not-
stretches the fabric.
It's just for demonstration purposes only.
Exactly.
But that does raise a good point that you might want to starch
Correct.
your square before you start cutting it,
Correct.
before you start stitching it to really control that bias.
And any time during the point of construction that you see things are getting a little floppy,
Yeah.
it's okay to go ahead and starch again.
Sure.
Okay, so we did this for a 2 1/4 inch binding. So I'm just going to line this up and I'm going to cut my 2 1/4 inches. We'll go ahead and cut clear across the width of this. So we're going to have probably 4 strips.
You would just keep
Keep
cutting
cutting.
that.
Exactly.
All right. So here are some more strips that you've already
that
cut.
I've already cut. And we're just going to seam them together. And again, we're doing a little offset seam. And I'm going to eyeball that. And stitch it with a 1/4 inch seam. If you are the pin kind of person, this is where you might want to pin things. I'm not a pin person. And you're going to catch all of those ends again, so you don't need to tie on and tie off. I just do a straight row of stitching.
Yes.
And again, I'm going to press that seam open
Yes.
to reduce bulk.
Yes.
And once we have that pressing done, we're going to fold it in half and press again.
And it will end up looking
So it ends
like
up
this.
looking
Nice
like
and
this.
sharp.
Nice, sharp, ready to put on our finished piece.
Yes.
So we're going to line up the very edge of our bias binding with the very edge of our quilt.
Pretty typical at this point.
Yes, and
if
just
you-
a 1/4 inch seam. But I do want to show you how I miter. It's a little different than some people. So you're going to stitch to a 1/4 inch from the edge. So this foot actually has a little red line a 1/4 inch in front of the needle. So I
Okay.
just make sure that that lines up with the edge of my quilt.
Let's see, right.
And needle down and turn and stitch diagonally to the corner.
Okay.
And
So you get
once I
nice, sharp corners.
exactly. So now I'm going to show you how to do the join to finish the binding. What we're going to do is we're going to pin on this part of the binding exactly where this meets it and where this meets it.
Okay.
So I have a pin on the top layer of this.
Of your
that-
long end, your long
that-
tail.
Exactly, that matches the top layer of this short tail.
Okay.
And then I have a second pin on the short end of this that marks.
Yes.
And I'm going to go then a 1/2 inch beyond that because I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam.
Okay.
So I'm going to lose a total of a 1/2
Right.
inch. And the thing you have to be careful of here, I've found, is that you don't want to run over your pins.
Aha.
So I mark my 1/2 inch, and then I run my fingernail down here just to make sure that my pins aren't in
Yeah.
the way because it'll ruin my blade on my rotary cutter. And then I'm ready to, are you ready for this? Pin the ends. I never pin, but I do pin here.
Okay. Yeah. So if Lori's pinning somewhere, it means pinning highly recommended.
Exactly. And once I have pinned, and remember you're going to have this offset,
Again, offsetting, right?
again, which is the reason that I'm pinning. And you're usually working with a fairly short space, so it kind of tries to buckle,
Yeah.
which is why I pin. And again, we're just doing a 1/4 inch seam. We're going to be going across this, stitching across it again, so it's not important to tie on and tie off. And this is ready to press.
Again, you'd press it open.
I'm going to press it open again, and then we can just line things up
and finish
and
attaching
finish
it.
attaching that.
So how you finish it, because you always have nice, crisp, finished bindings.
That's right, and because I am so picky,
Yes.
it's really important to me that things match on the front as well as on the back.
Yes.
Which is why I start from the front.
And again, you don't typically hand finish your bindings.
No, I do not.
So this is a good way to, if you want to machine finish your bindings, this is a
Correct.
great technique for
Correct. So then we're going to go ahead and press this so we've got a nice flat, crisp edge.
So
Want to
you-
hand me the pressing
sure.
surface?
that. So you press it from the front?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So I'm going to press that just to get everything all nice and flat and smooth. And then I'm going
Do you
to,
press on the corners?
not particularly, I'm going to
Okay.
finger press that.
Okay.
And then I'm going to turn it over to the back. And I use a fusible web. And I just,
That comes in a 1/4 inch width.
yes, the 1/4 inch width is perfect for this. And I just fuse that down. And this is one of those places where you want to be sure you don't get it on the bottom of your iron. I go ahead and go clear around the corner.
Sure.
When I'm doing this, those threads that we were thinking about earlier, I just make sure they're tucked in so they're not going to
Okay.
show.
Do you trim your corners?
No.
No. Okay.
One of the things that when you're doing judged quilts, they like the binding to be nice and full.
Yes. Okay.
So we need the bulk of that batting there to fill the binding. And once I have that fused in place, I'm just going to
rid of
take
that
off
paper.
the paper and I'm going to press, and I just want the very edge here to cover my row of stitching.
Okay.
I can see my stitching and I just want to cover that. When I get to the corner, I'm really working and manipulating and making sure that that corner is a perfect little miter. And once I have that exactly where I need it, I press it in place.
Sometimes those have a tendency, they might want to shift or stretch or pull. But the steam seam, and the stitching off the corner and the steam seam really seems to help
That's right.
give a
It
nice,
really
crisp
does.
miter there.
And then this is my other trick, and the reason that I stitched from the front, my first row of stitching, is so that I had the bobbin thread to match to here on the back. And then I can go back to the front and do a row of stitching right next to the edge, and it's going to catch the back because I've got it fused in place.
Right.
It can't go anyplace.
Right.
So I'm going to do a row of straight stitching, and I have this neat foot that makes it much easier for me. It's a bi-level top stitch foot.
A bi-level top stitch
Yes.
foot. Okay.
It has a ridge on the bottom, and that ridge you can run right along the edge of the bias binding and adjust your needle position
Nice.
to wherever you need it to go. What I usually do is I adjust my needle position, and then I just roll by hand the needle down to see where it's at. If I like where it's at, then I'm ready to start
Okay.
stitching. See how easy that
Yeah.
makes that go with that ridge on the bottom of
Yep.
the foot? I'm
Nice
going
and
to
straight.
stop right where the fold is and turn.
Okay,
And you can
and
just
just keep going,
keep going.
and then you're done.
And you're done, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Fun.
Thanks so much, Lori.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out Quilters Newsletter TV for other tutorials and interviews, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters, and Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.